Yep. They are very timely over here. Good morning, everybody. Hope your spring breaks were good. Anybody do anything extra fun? Oh no, I see some heads shaking. No, that's too bad. Well, I hope you at least got to catch up on some work if you didn't get to go anywhere fun. I know travel is a little difficult right now. All right, looks like we've still got some people coming in. All right, it looks like we have a lot of people in so far, so I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So Anime Data, welcome back. So for this session today, we're going to be discussing episodes 18 and 20, focusing on Kisa and Hiro. So some two pretty great characters. What are your initial thoughts from watching these episodes?
I did not like Hiro very much, but I mean, it's obviously kind of intentional that we're not really supposed to like him much. He's very antagonizing and rude, but it's also part of his, like, he's a kid and he's also going through like a lot with his family. So
yeah, he's a very interesting figure. I think antagonizing is a great word for it. Like anything somebody says, he's got some comeback to like twist their words into like some awful thing that they've just said. So he's a very interesting character. How about anybody else?
What was I'm forgetting her name. What was the name of the little Kisa? Is that
Yeah.
her name?
Yeah,
I really liked her character. I think it was like really special to see the relationship that she had with Toru and kind of like how Toru kind of like dragged that. It like I think for me it just showed like a lot of compassion, like empathy, kind of like mutually. So I just thought it was really cute.
Yeah, I like that you pointed that out, kind of Toru's like neutrality with her, you know, not trying to push her, just trying to kind of meet her where she was at and be kind of present in that space with her. I think that there are some great examples of that. So speaking of that, we can kind of move forward. Kisa Soma, you know, the main kind of character that's introduced in the first of the two episodes that you watched. So for her, you know, I think very standout question with her is the selective mutism. So we see her not talking. And so is this selective mutism, I guess, is kind of the big question that I would want to be thinking about today. Okay, so diagnostic criteria for selective mutism. One is that there is a consistent failure to speak in specific social situations in which there is an expectation for speaking, like at school, despite speaking in other situations. This interferes with educational or occupational achievement or their social communication, like being able to talk to friends. It lasts for at least 1 month, and it's not limited to just the first month of school. It's not attributable to language. Like if somebody requires a specific language, but they don't speak that language, that's not considered part of selective mutism. And it's not better explained by a communication disorder like childhood onset fluency disorder. And it does not occur exclusively during the course of autism spectrum disorder, schizophrenia, or another psychotic disorder. So there are some associated features. Okay, my slide is being kind of weird. Excessive shyness, fear of social embarrassment, social isolation and withdrawal, clinging. Okay. Compulsive traits, negativism, and temper tantrums. And there's some comorbidity, like other anxiety disorders. Social anxiety disorder would be the #1 comorbidity. Separation anxiety disorder, specific phobia. They might also have oppositional behaviors. So kind of some of the things that we were seeing with Yo-chan, but those oppositional behaviors may be limited just to this situations that are requiring speech. So it's not like what we would see in ERISA where, you know, this opposition is kind of broad. You might also have communication delays or disorders. And from here on, I think it'd be great to kind of talk through, for you guys to talk through some of these things and kind of go through a few of these different aspects and really kind of dive into depth of examples that you've seen from the episode, kind of like what we usually do now. So we'll split up into breakout rooms from here and we'll paste what specifically I'd like you to address in each one.
Supposed to give examples for the different criteria that you listed?
Being recorded.
Yeah, examples are great. What was the other thing you were thinking?
Like rule out disorders, I guess.
Which room were you in?
That's a great question.
Oh,
I think 4.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think just examples are fantastic. Yeah. Okay, I think we have everybody back. All right, great. I'll share my screen again so you guys can have like something to work from. Okay, so room 1. So as kind of the main part of this sort of diagnostic criteria, we're going to have room 1 kind of break down these specifics of that like one general sentence and kind of go through it more by specifics. So room 1, if you wouldn't mind somebody to speak up and kind of go through and tell me if you guys thought of any like examples that you saw for any of these criteria.
So we said that she does fit the first one with consistent failure to speak. Even when with Toru, like when she asks her like what she wants to eat, she can't really say it, so she like makes that like game for her. And then Kyo even says something like you can't even like say what you want to eat, and it like makes her feel like bad. And then in specific social situations and then expectation for speaking, we said that it might not apply to her just because like she just refuses to speak at all, especially in the beginning when like Toru first meets her. But like probably like as like she gets better, she starts being able to say like words and stuff. And then also because I think they like had mentioned that she gets like bullied at school, so that's also why she didn't even want to go. And then for immediate family members, we said that it might not apply to her just because she didn't even like want to talk to her mom, and like her mom was like saying like she doesn't know what to do. And then even with Hatsuharu, because like you see like he's really close with her and like cares for her, she still like refuses to speak to him, like in the beginning though, but I'm assuming like later on she's like able to actually speak and everything. But at the moment it's very like she only kind of like trusts Toru because Toru doesn't like push her to speak and just like lets her like kind of just like be how she is. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, in her, we are definitely seeing that consistent failure to speak. Like you've pointed out, it's so consistent that it is across social situations at this point. It definitely is occurring in situations where there is an expectation for speaking, like at school, or with peers. But you're right, at the beginning, it's so severe that it's across kind of all social situations. And she's not even speaking really in other ones. As we saw, she did kind of progress to where she was speaking in other situations and that she could speak in other situations. But it did take some work for her to even be able to get to that point. So, very, very severe failure to speak. So with this, I think at this point, when you're having somebody who's not speaking, you might be considering like a catatonia picture, even where they're not being vocal, or they're not being expressive. And so I think kind of when you're trying to go between like a selective mutism or say a catatonia, with the selective mutism, it seems to be more about like a social situation rather than just they cannot seem to physically like form words or vocalize. So I think that you guys did a great job on this one. Okay, room 2. How about for this part? What are we thinking?
Yeah, I mean, we saw that it definitely applies. I mean, she started skipping school because of like bullying, the ignoring that she was having, and just not speaking because of it. So definitely interfering with her education and social communication. But I mean, she was also having difficulty with teachers because we saw that letter they sent, which was kind of, I did not like the letter. It was messed up. I mean, it allowed for Yuki to open up to her and share his similar experience. But she also did use pointing to communicate with, how Sage was saying, with cooking. Toru had her like point at what she wanted and like play a little game, whatever game that was, to do.
Yeah, so she was able to use some of those nonverbal means to communicate. She was still trying to communicate, even though she couldn't quite vocalize it through speech. But yeah, I agree with you. At the teacher's letter, that was such a good moment, I think, in the anime. And I think it is something you see kind of often on social media, even sort of the mentality of like, oh, how can you expect anyone to love you if you don't love yourself first? And, I think it's always important to keep kind of that nuanced view that we are, kind of creatures who evolved to be in a family setting. We are evolved to kind of thrive when we are loved and cared for. And, when we grow up feeling loved and cared for, that helps us to create that love for ourselves. And so, to expect even a child to love themselves if they're not feeling that from, their support system is kind of a big ask from that teacher. Did anybody else have any thoughts on the letter now that you mentioned it, James?
I think it kind of shows the teacher had good intentions, but like you can kind of tell like the teacher didn't even like really know what she was going through, or that she was being like bullied or anything. So it's very like closed-minded, like didn't ask what was wrong or anything.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It certainly didn't seem like the teacher was trying to harm her or make things worse. And I think, that's an important thing to consider, is that even when we're trying to be motivating, kind of taking a step back and seeing, is that being successful? And have we asked enough questions to figure out what would motivate or what would help somebody? Yeah, definitely. So great scene. I'm glad you mentioned it. But continuing with kind of your room 2 assignment, how about with this one?
It did seem like she was eager to like engage, like she, especially with like Toru and like when she was at the house, that she wanted to be like a part of things. Like again with choosing a meal for dinner.
Yeah.
But other than that, I feel like we didn't really see too many examples of that until she started like speaking again.
Yeah, we didn't really get to see her much when it came, to like being at school. So we kind of missed out on that. But yeah, she would try to, like have tea or watch anime, like things that didn't necessarily involve speaking. And she was able to seem to be able to enjoy sitting around with everybody and engaging and participating. And so what do we think about this?
I wasn't too sure what the actual duration was. I kind of
Yeah.
assume it was more than a month, because I know she was skipping class for a while, long enough that they sent a letter home.
Yeah, it definitely seems like more than a month. So, I think we can think about that being true for her. And always an important thing to remember is that timeline. And yeah, it doesn't seem like it's limited to her first month of school. She's been in school for at least a couple of years now, it seems. So yeah, way to go. All right, room 3. You guys kind of got the rule out room. So what are your thoughts? Who wants to speak up for room 3?
So I was in room 3. We were all kind of like hesitant to talk because I guess we were kind of confused. Because we kind of were just like looking at all the disorders and kind of being like, she doesn't fit really any of the symptoms for anything. So
That's a
we
great place to be at.
okay. So we're kind of just like saying like, well, she knows the language, like she's speaking, like we know later on like she can speak like the language.
Yeah.
So and then like for the communication disorder, like on the left side, like for the language disorder, like she sorry, she doesn't have issues with like knowing the language or like anything like that, like speech sound, like it's not like she doesn't know how to say like certain like sounds or like anything like that, like the stutter either, and the social communication disorder, like we were kind of just talking about how like we know kind of why she was like not speaking for that period, like from the bullying and I guess like being laughed at, and then like even for like on the other side, like the other disorders like autism spectrum disorders and schizophrenia, we didn't like get into it that much, like we were kind of talking about the other stuff and like kind of trying to figure out what we were doing, but just like about her not really fitting into any of those other symptoms.
Yeah, no, this was a tough room. It kind of required you to think about a few different things. So I think you guys did a great job. And at the end of the day, if we don't see any of those other things, well, then great. We have the thing that we were thinking it was. So there's no harm in saying, okay, great, none of these apply. that's kind of, if we have a pretty good hunch that it's selective mutism, then that works out pretty well for us, actually. So yeah, I agree with you. I don't think it is any of these other things. Like, you know, when somebody isn't communicating and they're a child, we would be wanting to consider, like, is this autism, for instance? And, you know, she is capable of kind of like making that eye contact, like responding to her name. She's doing kind of those like nonverbal communications in a way that's very much like a stand-in for communication. So we're not, you know, thinking about that. You know, like with any type of like a schizo, like psychosis type thing, we're not seeing any signs of that. No, like hallucinations or like responding to internal stimuli or anything. And then as far as the other communication disorder, like whether it's a language or like the speech down or the stuttering, you know, some of those will, you know, each of those have their own specifics, but I think, you know, one of the general things is that it's not restricted to a specific social situation. So it is like how she speaks or responds in school is the same as how she is with family or how she is with friends. And, you know, I think we did say, like at the beginning, yes, her nonverbal aspects were across all situations. But then once we kind of got to know her a little bit better, we did see that she was able to speak in specific situations where she felt more comfortable, and creating that comfort allowed her to speak. So when that's the case, we're not really thinking that there is some sort of a language or like a speech type of disorder. Yeah, so I think you guys did a great job with a hard room. All right, room 4. You guys had associated features. Did we see any of these with her?
Yeah, we definitely saw a lot of these. The excessive shyness, obviously, when somebody's really keeping to themselves, it does become like a problem and they're not talking to anybody or anything. The fear of social embarrassment, she avoids going back to school out of fear for being made fun of and bullied further. So she doesn't want to get put in that situation. Social isolation, again, she's not going to school, she's staying out of school, she's ran away from home and everything, she's not talking to many people. Clinging, when she found like the first person to show her any positive attention, she clung to Toru. I didn't know about compulsive traits. My group didn't know anything about that. Negativism, she has a really negative outlook on herself before Toru helps her. She has really bad self-confidence and everything. And she has a negative outlook towards other people because they're not being very nice to her. So she has a negative outlook on going back to school and everything. Temper tantrums, running away from home and disobeying her mom. And when she's in the state of being the tiger, she's biting people. Oppositional behavior, same exact thing. She has just a little bit of like conduct problems when she's in that state of beforehand. Communication disorder, same thing. I wouldn't say that, like they said before, there's not really any other problems besides she's kind of refusing to talk, or not refusing outwardly, just like is kind of pushed into a corner of not wanting to talk anymore. Yeah, I didn't see that last one. I don't think we had that.
Oh, I didn't include that when I sent it to your room because I didn't want you to step on the toes of the next room. But yeah, so I think that you guys said everything like so well. Yeah, with the clinging, like they mentioned, she was like following Toru like a little duckling. So we really got to see a very good example of that. And yeah, I think you made a good point of the temper tantrums when you see her in the tiger form, like she's literally biting people. So it's a great representation. So yeah, I completely agree with you. Also, yes, I didn't notice any compulsive traits either. So, you know, that's always something else that could be present, but we didn't see that in her example. But yeah, I think those are really good examples. Thanks, guys. All right. And so not wanting to step on room 5's toes, but another associated feature is that it is very commonly co-occurring with social anxiety disorder. So room 5, if you guys want to take a crack at this one.
Yeah, so essentially what we did for our breakout room is kind of look at the diagnostic criteria for social anxiety disorder and kind of just see where that lines up with Kisa. So let me pull that up really quickly.
That's always a great place to look. I'm glad you guys pulled that up.
Yeah, we looked at the DSM. We had a little trouble finding the PDF at first, but it's okay. So it says like marked fear or anxiety about one or more social situations in which the individual is exposed to possible scrutiny by others. So obviously we see that she has a lot of anxiety with her peers. And so there's a note that says in children, the anxiety must occur in peer settings and not just during interactions with adults. So obviously we see that it's mostly with her peers as well as people who are older than her, like in the beginning, like Kyo and Toru. And Yuki. So it does say that the individual fears that he or she will act in a certain way or show anxiety symptoms that will be negatively evaluated. But I didn't really feel like it was there. It was more just like that they were bullying her, just kind of like based on her looks, not really necessarily how she'd act. And then the social situations almost always provoke fear, anxiety. So obviously we see that she was like, they did provoke a lot of anxiety, especially because I feel like a telltale way to see that she was having anxiety was when she turned into, it was a tiger, right?
Yeah, tiger.
Okay, yeah. So when she
I thought it was a cat, and then they had to know that's a tiger.
Yeah. So we kind of see, I think that's like one of her coping mechanisms and kind of like a telltale sign that she's having a lot of anxiety because when she's a tiger, no one kind of expects her to talk. And as we see, she is like avoiding these situations that she needs to talk. And so we also see like they say like the fear of anxiety may be expressed by like being clingy or shrinking or failing to speak in social situations. So we definitely see this with Toru, even after she kind of builds that connection with her, that she is being very clingy, like clingy and stuff like that. Other things. So I do believe, so it says the fear, anxiety, or avoidance is persistent, lasting for 6 months or more. I believe that it lasted for 6 months. It definitely seemed like a while, like this was something that like Yuki and Kyo had like known, or like even her mom had known that she doesn't really like speak. And then the fear, anxiety, or avoidance causes clinically significant distress or impairment. So we see these things like her daily functioning. Obviously, she needs to go to school. We all need social interaction. That's a need for us. So it's definitely kind of important for that. And that definitely kind of, I think, impaired her functioning a little. And then we see that it's not really attributable to like physiological effects of like a substance, and it's not necessarily due to like panic disorder, body dysmorphia disorder, or autism spectrum disorder. And then also just a quick note that it does say like it's not performance only, because we see that, so it says like performance only would be if fear is restricted to speaking or performing in public, but we obviously see like even when she's like under the bush as a tiger, that she's like still very, very, very nervous. So it's not just in public, but also private settings as well.
Yeah, so I think that this is something that we'll be considering for her, and it's something that while selective mutism might sometimes happen first, we might see that social anxiety disorder persist even after the selective mutism might go away. So this is something that we, if we were her psychiatrist or psychologist, we'd really be wanting to keep an eye on and make sure that this didn't develop further. So I think you guys did a great job. I think you were definitely seeing some of those early signs that she might be having this as well. And what did you guys think about Yuki? We'd talked about Yuki before with social anxiety disorder. And then we had this kind of interesting revelation where he confides that he had also had a time in his past where he stopped speaking. What did you guys think about that?
Yeah, I definitely think like at one point, I mean, I think now looking at him, like it's like he obviously can function a lot better. But he definitely had like a very one-on-one and kind of like very empathetic response to Kisa, just because that he um, you know, like it said, he had a time when he stopped speaking, and that he, and I think you can also kind of see the like the remnants of hit like that kind of social anxiety, because he doesn't talk a lot. He's very keep to himself, only speaks when necessary. We obviously see that he confides in Toru, but like that's kind of the only person we see him really trust. But yeah, I mean, I feel like we haven't seen enough of like him as like a child, but I think definitely from like what we've seen from his empathetic response, the way he works now, and also like the things he talked about as him having trouble speaking, and kind of the behaviors matching up with Kisa, that definitely would be a possible diagnosis for him as well.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely some overlap between the two of them, and kind of what their past issues and potential future issues might be. But I think maybe we can all be proud of him for signing up for, student council. So he's slowly making strides, right? He's slowly pushing out of that. So kind of good to see that maybe in the future Kisa will improve as well. So some things to just keep in mind for selective mutism. Onset's usually before 5 years old. So we're kind of seeing that with Kisa. She's around this age or so. They say, I think that they're about like 6 or something. So, she's pretty young. And might not come to clinical attention until they start school, where the increase in that social interaction and performance tasks are present. So, sometimes you don't see a symptom until you're put in a situation where a symptom would be prompted by those requirements. The persistence of this is variable. Many people kind of might be quote outgrow this based on kind of some clinical response, but we don't fully know the longitudinal course of this disorder. And like we just said, for some, and particularly those with social anxiety as well, it might disappear, but then those symptoms of the social anxiety will be remaining. So even if they can maybe outgrow the selective mutism, they might still struggle with some of that social anxiety, kind of how we saw Yuki was towards the beginning of the show. So risk, possible temperamental, not really well identified. The possible things is that they might have a history of like shyness or social anxiety, or that social isolation, that behavioral inhibition. And they might, if they maybe have a bit of neuroticism, that might also contribute. Environmental, the parents can really play a role. So if parents really feel that social inhibition and they have behaviors that are really modeling that, like that reticence of like, oh, I don't really like to go hang out with friends, or, I am uncomfortable in social situations, the child can watch these behaviors that are being modeled for them, and that can have an effect. They might also have like very overprotective or controlling parents. And I think that this was interesting because there was one point in the show where Momiji mentioned kind of the response of mothers in the Zodiac, where he says that kind of either they really push their kids away and they don't want anything to do with them, or they're very overprotective and controlling. So, that's something to keep in mind, that an overprotective parent might have an effect on creating this. Genetic factors. So there is that significant overlap between the selective mutism and social anxiety, and there might be like a shared genetic factor because we see those two things overlap so commonly. I did want to mention bullying. I know that it can be a sensitive topic, and I know a lot of people, even in this room, virtual room, might have experienced that at some point. And it's something that I think is certainly worth talking about, because a lot of kids do experience it, especially now that there are kind of even more routes by which to experience it rather than just in person. Now you have a lot of like virtual and social media routes for that to be acted on. So I found this really good article that you guys are welcome to look up, that it's interesting, about psychiatric outcomes of bullying, where they focused on twins. They found that being bullied was associated with a wide range of psychiatric disorders with children and young adults. And they found specific impact of bullying on a few different ones, with social anxiety having an odds ratio of 1.7, separation anxiety 1.9, and suicidal ideation 1.3. So, something certainly significant enough to keep in mind. And that shared genetic influence was consistent with that social anxiety being both antecedent and also a consequence of being bullied. So, we kind of see that social anxiety really being at play when it comes to bullying. So, these are definitely things we have to keep in mind. And, if you do end up working in a role that involves like psychology or psychiatry, that's certainly something to keep in mind, and certainly something to ask about with patients, especially children, kind of what their, social life is like at school. So also to keep in mind, this is a relatively rare disorder. They don't have an exact prevalence, but somewhere between 0.03% and 1%, so pretty rare. Doesn't seem to vary by sex or race. More likely to manifest in young children than adolescents or adults. So kind of that range that we're seeing with Kisa, young children rather than like a teenager. And that's it. Here's the reference for the one article if you guys wanted to take a look at that. And then also, of course, DSM, which is always a great source. All right, does anybody have any questions or thoughts? All right, sounds good. Well, I hope you guys have a good day. Have a little break before your next session. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Thank you. Have a good one.